In the beginning, there was the sea, and the sea formed the land. It molded the bays, carved the coves, and sculptured the coast. With mighty blows, it tore the earth from a continent and made of the land almost an island. As it receded, it deposited its tide water on marsh, beach, and tidal basin to forever mark its handiwork in creating a place of beauty. In the beginning, there was the sea, and it held life. But the life was expendable. To the searching nets, the sea disgorged its treasures. A new race of fishermen came into being, and with them, an old way of life was repeated on new shores. But the land was plentiful in its own right and grew its own food. Under the warm, temperate sun, the rich earth turned its grass into grain, its trees into great orchards, and its seeds into mixed crops. For the landowners, it was only necessary to supply hands for the planting and harvest. The hams came from across many seas, English, Irish, Scottish, French, and German. But though the origin differed and the settlements were widespread, the pioneers and loyalists made of this earth by the sea a place to live and enjoy living. The land stands testimony to their resourcefulness and vigor. And so it blossomed, this place born of the sea and blessed by earth and climate. It blossomed and grew into a country known by many names: Acadia, land of Evangeline, and ocean playground. But the men from the hills of Gaul named it best. New Scotland they called it, and as Nova Scotia, it became a land of promise. The sea roared on, and Nova Scotia continued to expand. The hamlets grew into cities, and the cities became the trading markets of an industrious people. But with the moving years, a subtle change crept into the maritime scene. The sound of the sea gave way to the sound of a greater force. The little rock-sheltered ports darkened under the shadow of great chimneys. The men who went down to the sea now went down to the pits and mines. Nova Scotia, land of promise, had come of age. The promise was kept. Steel is the great provider. In the fiery molten core of the huge steel furnaces, the very fabric of our modern life is brewed and poured. Open your eyes to the expanding universe, and there you will see steel supplying the ways and means, building hearth and home. Under giant presses, the malleable steel is drawn and shaped. Unseen hands, far removed from the searing heat of the red-hot ingot, control its every movement. Much as a baker kneads dough, the steel is turned, pressed, drawn, and repressed until its pliable body has been shaped to a given size and purpose. Milling is the first of a long series of adventures in the life of a steel rod. Whether it be steel billets for axles or gun barrels, structural steel for buildings, tool steel for manufacturing, pressed steel or plating, the mill puts the first trim, the first polish on the youthful new member of the family as he sets out to take his place in organized society. The fabricated forms of steel are countless, limited only by the inventiveness of the builder and the needs of the buyer. Of all products, the steam shovel might be the most symbolic, for here is the first worker on the great building projects, the creator of highway, canal, and dam. It would be possible to measure national progress by the tons of earth that have been removed or displaced. In the beginning, there was the sea and the land, and then came the age of air. With the first surge of the new power, Nova Scotia was ready. It had the location, the people, and the initiative. Aviation became a profession for those who thought of the earth as a jumping-off place. The modern aircraft industries owe a debt to the men who first saw the forests and tidal bores from 2,000 feet up. It was its strategic position as the eastern door to the continent that gave Nova Scotia its aerial importance. Here, there was need for a self-contained aircraft industry to supply and service coastal needs. As the entrance to America, there was need, too, to serve the forces who stood guardian of the shipping lanes and maintained a vigil on the continent's most accessible flank. The crafts of aviation are many: draftsman, machinist, pattern maker, electrician, engineer, welder. The list omits few of the specialized trades, for the quality of air performance rests upon individual skills. Nowhere is it more evident that the fisherman has come a long way from his nets and bait and has learned much by the seaside. Electronics is a word of no given dimensions. It has long since lost its original stature in its expansion to cover most of the 20th century's miracles. Its many products have created a whole new vocabulary: oscillograph, transistors, cathode rays, television, radar, and VHF transmitters. We fly by electronics, cook with electronics, and are cured of illness with electronics, and measure height, depth, weight, and volume by electronics. But in Nova Scotia, the science has a special measuring value. Electronics here show the true progress between the age of the sea and the age of industry. If it was the coal mines that built the steel mills and the geographic location that helped aviation, it was the convenient timber reserves that fostered the industrialization of the forest. Pulp products such as newsprint and paper plates have such common usage as to be almost overlooked in a survey of industrial potential. Yet here is basic industry, creating for basic needs. Behind all production, developing and expanding it, lies the work of the modern research laboratory. In Nova Scotia, the possible use of high-grade fish oil in paints and varnishes, synthetic detergents, vitamin concentrates, and as a refined edible oil is a study that opens new avenues for maritime growth. And so the products of this new generation of workers are manifold and surprising. They include primary and secondary manufacturing and embrace the raw materials of the province: gypsum, coal, barytes, lead, dolomite, and limestone. They command the arts and sciences, metallurgy, chemistry, engineering, handicraft, and research. Initiative and imagination are part of the production pattern, while technical competency and plain know-how are associated with a dependable labor force. But what of power, the force that turns the wheel? With its many lakes and streams and steam coal deposits, an efficient generating system was an early development. From the dammed up waters, the energy was drawn that was to give life to the tools of production. With hydroelectric stations no more than 25 miles from the coastal area, the coverage was compact and complete. Transportation is the deciding factor in industrial expansion. From her natural assets, Nova Scotia has created a vast interlocking system of harbors, airports, rail and road connections. Every part of the province is easily reached for import or export with minimum reshipment requirements. The highland hills of Cape Breton inspired the name New Scotland. The lochs and glens still speak of an older world, and the present generation have lost little of the echo. The sheltering hills preserve the Gaelic tongue, the swing of the sporran, and the skirl of the pipes, that all may come, listen, and take away with them a wee drop of happiness. It is difficult to explain the Nova Scotian way of life. As a cliché, the phrase is meaningless. But in the clean, bracing air washed by the morning sea, in the community events of chicken barbecue or Gaelic mod, in the leisurely pace of the people, the phrase takes on a depth and power that brings the visitor closer to its real meaning. In a land where the forests run to the sea, and the woodcock, pheasant, and deer enjoy game sanctuaries and an abundance of natural feeding grounds, the sport of hunting has a rare quality, and the sportsman a rare experience. It is the sea again that provides a different sport for the sunbathers and ankle-deep seamen, a lobster broil. For lobster are most to be enjoyed in their natural setting, with rocks for heating, seaweed for flavoring, and fingers for eating. The fine threads of maritime life are gathered together in its cities and towns. Each contributes its special gifts: Yarmouth fishing, Liverpool pulp, Windsor gypsum, Kentville apples, Sydney steel, and Digby scallops. With its magnificent Angus L. MacDonald Bridge, Halifax has added a new gem to its commercial crown and given impetus to the flow of goods that pass through one of the world's finest harbors. As Canada's only ice-free eastern port, Halifax lives in a world of whistling tugs and rattling donkey engines. But the sound is misleading, for it obscures a multitude of activities, programs, and facilities far removed from the realm of swinging cargoes. The city is an educational center. Its schools and colleges are infused with the new maritime spirit. Learn, practice, and build. In providing the means to learn, Nova Scotia is securing its future. The real castles of any community are the homes. They show a man for what he is, what he thinks, and how he lives. The castles of Halifax are no exception. Though mute of tongue, they tell their story. The great population centers and industrial areas of the Western world are located by the sea or by rivers that run to the sea. For the sea lanes are barter lanes, roads that lead to prosperity and understanding. Nations in their commercial operations may ship by rail or transport by air, but it is by the sea that they trade. Herein lies the great value of Nova Scotia, a province with an industrial potential suspended between three continents. Of mainland North America, it lies closest to Britain and the continent. Its stable labor force lives beside the heartland of America. Its many transportation assets act as a balance between industrial Canada and populated Europe. From its ports, it can ship directly to the markets of the world. In the beginning, there was the sea. In the end, there will be the sea. But the land that the sea formed has found new life and purpose. From the courage of men who challenged the deeps, from the vision of pioneers and the stability of Loyalist and Scot, there has come a new industrial empire, a tidal workshop of many talents. Along the coast, the tides still roar and thunder, and across the land, the springtime still breathes life and color in Evangeline's country. But the face and heart of Nova Scotia is firmly turned towards industry, to the things that she can do and do well, to the role for which she was fitted in the beginning.